So thanks everyone for joining. This is the webinar and panelist discussion that we're putting together with Mesa and um, the Industry 4.0 Club on the topic of leveraging generative AI on the factory floor. So this is a very important topic for a lot of people right now, a topic in which people are in which there's a lot of interest by a lot of people. So we've got a great panel here, and we'll talk through some of the topics around that area. My name is Chris Kammer. I am the moderator of the webinar today. I am the international chair for Mesa and also a solution advisor for Aviva, a software company that sells solutions in this space. Today on the call, we have a few different presenters, and they're not actually presenting, but more talking in any case. But we have Jaapie van Heerden. And Jaapie, would you like to introduce yourself briefly?
Yes. So welcome everyone. I hope that we can have an interesting discussion today and have some interesting information or insights for you. My name, as you can already heard, Jaapie van Heerden, based in the USA, working for Clarion Corporation. We're a specialty chemicals company, so by no means a technology provider, just a user of this technology. And my objective here is to add our learnings from implementing Gen AI in the workplace, not only on the shop floor, but also in the rest of our company during the past 2 years, and looking forward to have a good discussion.
Thanks, Jaapie. Martin Klook is also on the line. Would you like to introduce yourself, Martin?
Sure. Yeah, I'm also excited to chat with the group here and continue on the chat that we started just before we got on the line. Martin Klook, co-founder and CEO of Raven AI. We work with manufacturers to help them understand how each second is spent on the shop floor to see how much it costs to produce their goods and ultimately help them reduce that cost. Background in engineering, robotics, control systems, spent my first 5 years on the shop floor as a supervisor, transitioned to tech, and I've spent the last 2 years building Gen AI tech for both our company and for our customers. So excited to sort of bring to talk about practical applications, which I know will be the focus of our chat today.
Excellent. Thanks, Martin. Mike is the person who originally suggested that we have this discussion. So, Mike, if you could introduce yourself, appreciate that.
Thanks, Chris. I'm Mike Unger. I'm the CEO of the Industry 4.0 Club. We'll talk about the club in just a minute. My background is I spent a few years in the Army, 35 years with Michelin, North America, most of that in manufacturing, focused on continuous improvement in operations. For the last 5 years, I've been involved as a coach and really focused on helping companies deploy smart manufacturing and Industry 4.0. Really happy to be here with you all today. It's a really important topic, I think, because we've got so much in the press today about Gen AI and its implications, and it's important that we get to talk about the practical side of it. So I'm excited to be part of that conversation today.
Excellent. Thanks, Mike. Yeah, we'll obviously hear from all of these panelists as we go forward here. So thanks everybody for joining. A real quick introduction to Mesa International. So I've been involved with Mesa for many years, over 25 years. We are a non-for-profit association, international members all over the world in many countries, and we've been operating since 1992. We provide a non-commercial professional environment where folks like pretty much everybody on this webcast, I'm sure, share a common theme where folks like us can address different types of business challenges and share our expertise in those areas. Obviously, today's is going to be about Gen AI and its application to industrial situations. Our goal is to build bridges of understanding from plant to enterprise and to clarify the role and value of modern IT in production and manufacturing operations. So we're 30 years in business, actually more than 30 years now, obviously, since we were founded in 92. I guess that logo, we're going to need to update that. But we've been around a little while, and as you can tell, based on this topic, we're trying to move ahead with the times. And Mike, if you can maybe give a quick introduction to Industry 4.0 Club.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, the club, we're also a nonprofit. And our purpose is to engage the power of diverse worldwide talent to accelerate the global evolution to Industry 4.0. There are a lot of small to mid-sized companies today that, just haven't thought through their future relative to integrating smart manufacturing Industry 4.0 into their environments. And so as a club, we came together, 4 years ago now, really with this thought in mind that we need to help educate and help advance the integration of technology, smart manufacturing into manufacturing, so that companies will be here for the next decade and beyond. So happy to be here and happy to help really engage in this important topic.
Good. Excellent. Thanks, Mike. Like I said, we have a great panel here, so let's dive in. We're looking to talk about a few different topics. We want to talk about first kind of what's been done in the industrial space using generative AI. And, there are a few different areas that we'll touch on, including things like, summarization of equipment performance and product quality, identification of discrepancies, summarization of documents, and even things like meeting minutes, also supporting purchasing decisions and doing sales and CRM interactions. Taking a look at how all those things interact. It really depends on all the data that you're bringing in. Also, potentially even R&D. So we'll talk about those topics. We'll also talk about, in addition to what's been done, what are kind of the things that we think can be done? What are the next steps? So what are kind of the applications that we think Gen AI could be applied to? And what are some of the key success factors and in order to make that happen? And kind of what data is needed in order to train these models. So those are the topics we'll go into. And with that, I'm just going to start asking some questions of the panel. And we can kind of go from there. Actually, before I do that, one of the first things that I want to mention and just acknowledge is that today is a day of recognition. This is World Autism Awareness Day. And we're actually going to talk about that. Whoops, I don't know why that happened. Hang on. Sorry. I forgot to cover a couple of things here, but I did want to mention, as I said, that today is World Autism Awareness Day. And so we're going to talk about that a little bit when we get into these topics. But before I start asking the questions, I just wanted to mention if you're listening and want to participate, there are two ways that you can do that. One is using the chat, open the webinar chat using this button here. And oops. Sorry. You can use this button here to get to the chat, and also Q&A. You can get to that using this button here. And if you chat, you can send in real time. We will try to respond. I would use that for technical issues about the webinar itself, and then Q&A. We will either reply immediately if it's an easy one, or we'll talk to it live at the end of the session. So we are recording this. We will be posting it along with there's really no slides, so we probably won't post any slides. We'll just post this recording to the resource library within a week or so. So with that, now I am going to unshare and start asking the questions. And so the very first question I'm going to ask is going to go to Martin. And Martin, my question to you is, how can generative AI facilitate better decision making on the shop floor or in a plant?
Well, I think maybe we start with, what is the plant trying to achieve that generative AI can help them with? And most organizations are focused on trying to improve and reduce cost, improve throughput. And the ability to improve is directly related to the ability for problem solvers to be solving the right problem at the right time. And there's two things that stop them from doing that. One is not knowing what problem to solve at that time. And I would say the bigger problem right now is not having the time. So if, in working in a plant, if you think about, who the most influential problem solvers are, it's the supervisor, it's the maintenance, it's the engineer, it's your team lead. And if you look at how they spend their time, a tremendous amount of time is spent feeding these data systems. So if you think about the day of a supervisor, for example, they have their stand up, then they have to do the report outs, they have to digest a whole bunch of information. So if you just map the day of a production supervisor and look at where there's opportunities to leverage generative AI, there's lots of opportunities. And one of the things and when I think about generative AI right now in its current state and in the most practical state, it is excellent at summarizing information, at transforming information, at creating new documents. So those three things here. And if you think of the workload of a supervisor, they spend lots of their time doing that. So I would say that the way that generative AI can be used, and this is not fancy generative AI. This is $20 a month ChatGPT 4.0. The way that can be used in the short term to improve decision making is giving problem solvers more time to solve problems on the shop floor by learning how to use these tools in their daily workflow. And I would say the frame for folks in manufacturing is not that there's an AI here that's gonna make decisions for me or interpret things for me. It's like the transition from wireframe 3D to 3D CAD, where suddenly you're able to do the job 10 times faster. And I think that's what we have here. You're able to do the same job faster. And if you're able to do it faster, you should get more time to solve problems. So really, it's using it to reduce time spent not solving problems, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's almost like having it do the dirty work for you, right?
It's doing the stuff. So you think about what a supervisor has to do. They have to type up, what just happened in their morning stand-up, rather than record the stand-up and communicate the summary of that recording to others. Or if you're digesting a whole bunch of information to figure out what happened last week, well, now all this information is available. So I think the ability to take information in, to summarize, synthesize, interpret, and share with others, textual information now can flow incredibly efficiently with generative AI. Now, what I'm not like leveraging generative AI to come up with those insights that are going to help to drive improvements, I would say that our problem solvers at the plants are better at doing that today. What we need to do is help them spend more time solving problems and help them sift through the information that's available to know which one to start with.
Very good points. Yeah. Yapi, would you like to comment on Martin's
Yes,
thoughts?
absolutely. When you look at the day in the life of an operator or supervisor, as Martin mentioned, they need to respond to immediate problems that they experience in the manufacturing process. Now, they are responsible to ensure that the production line maximizes throughput, that quality is great, that cost is at the minimum. And whenever they experience a problem with respect to one of these things, they need to take action. Now, there are two elements to it that I believe AI can assist them. The one is, first of all, to realize that there's a problem before you actually, let's say, get the results of this problem, let's say quality problems or throughput reduction or so on. But the second thing is that they need to determine as quickly as possible what's causing this problem. So not only detecting it, but also resolving this problem as quickly as possible. And I do believe that these are areas where Gen AI and AI in general, not necessarily generative AI as such, but AI can play a significant role into helping the companies improve these three core elements of operations.
Do you have a specific example that you could describe? So you mentioned identifying the problem. So, like, do you have a specific example that
Well, let's take, for example, that you have a certain quality parameter that you know is critical to your product. Okay. That would typically be your indicator whether something goes wrong. If this quality parameter tends to move in the wrong direction, you need to act. And you need to identify as quickly as possible which variables, either process or input variables to your process, is causing this. And you need to get the insight as quickly as possible on where is this problem coming from? What do you need to do to rectify this problem?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
so I guess there's a line between sort of AI in the past to detect quality defects versus generative AI, and you know the both can do different things. So in this application, are you referencing the use of non-generative AI to detect defects, or the countermeasure?
Let me
Combination
let me interject there if I could, Martin. I know where you're going. I think the general line of discussion here is, where Yapu is going is that you need to. There's kind of the sequence of detection, which requires some kind of indicator, and then investigation, which which identifies, what might affect that indicator, what might affect that quality value, and then action. And you brought that up before, the need to do that. So I'll let you go ahead and ask your question there. I just wanted to point that out, that there's the sequence that happens. And I think what you're focusing on right now is the indication portion of it, right?
Well,
The
I think
detection portion of it.
the detection is key, and I think what's interesting in the example, Yappy, that you just mentioned. So, like, we're getting, we've developed technology over the last, decade or so to detect that issue, but then to get to that root cause and corrective action, you often need to go deeper. And let's say, for example, the engineer is looking to solve that problem and creates a trail of text, or maybe somebody else has encountered a similar situation, and that happens to be captured in notes or in documents that traditionally have lived in areas that are inaccessible at the moment. And Yappy, as you mentioned, if you are a supervisor, you are responsible for fixing that problem in the moment, and it's money to the organization if you're not able to solve it quickly. And you can't afford to look through directories and hunt around and go to page number 78 of this particular manual. So if you're looking to apply that corrective action, the triggers have been there for a long time, because the triggers are often a signal. But now, how can you enable the problem solvers to not only know that there's a problem, to follow the path that others have taken to solve the problem, or uncover new insights? And the fact that information can flow freely is incredibly exciting. And I know that you in particular have worked around the capture of data on the shop floor. Textual data is incredibly a rich data. It's just been a challenge to use it.
And the challenge comes in exactly when this operator or supervisor needs to solve this problem, is that the time that it takes to filter through all of the different sources of information to be able to get, let's say, some leads into what the root cause of this problem is, and then to fix it, can take an endless amount of time. I think in a lot of cases they get to a point where they say, what the heck, the problem solved itself. I don't need to do anything anymore, and just continue. Or they find workarounds to 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 this problem, and they never solve the root cause of the problem. And that's really where the essence comes in, is
Yeah.
that, and the value of tools like AI, that you can quickly assess and analyze all the data out there, or rather information out there, to determine what's the most likely causes of this problem that I'm experiencing, and then act as quickly as possible on that.
Yeah.
The,
Yuppie, that's really good commentary, and you keep going back to the act or action words, and I appreciate that. Mike, I'm going to put you on the spot after that very interesting commentary to see if you have anything to add.
yeah, I was just gonna to jump in on this idea, and I can't speak for every manufacturing environment, but I can remember many, many times where, we found an issue and somebody would say, I think I saw that a year ago, or I think I saw that 6 months ago. And it wasn't documented anywhere, but we happen to have the right person there at the time. And so the wonderful thing about Gen AI, at least as I think about this issue of developing, going back to your point about action, is that information, if it's done correctly, then we were talking beforehand about capturing end of shift notes and that kind of thing. It goes into this knowledge base. And so I've enhanced the method of problem solving because I don't have to have just the experts there. If I capture this systematically, every time I address an issue, I'm enhancing the overall knowledge I have about this particular issue. And that's a wonderful thing because my experience, I'll talk about tires for a moment. Rubber's a natural product. And what would happen, quite honestly, is we would have things would happen in the summer because of the heat, and in the winter because of the cold, that we would then go away because the temperature would change or the humidity would change. And so we couldn't replicate it, or we would be, oh yeah, last year we had this problem. And so being able to begin to put this into this sort of knowledge into a Gen AI, and then of course the equipment, a year ago it was new and now it's worn. And so you start being able to capture all these parameters and have it into a model for problem solving. Enhanced problem solving to me is a real takeaway from what we can do today versus what we had to try to do years ago.
Yeah, you bring up a good point there. There's the combination of I'll call it, and feel free anyone to jump in with a different word, but the experiential data that comes from, and that oftentimes is in written word form, per your points, Martin, with, to your points, Mike, process data. When you can combine those two sorts of things and then use that in a Gen A environment, you can really, I think, do a lot of what we talked about. Detection leading to root cause analysis, leading to action.
I wonder if I could share a practical example here. So, like if you say use maintenance software and there happens to be a collection of notes relating to a particular piece of equipment, you can filter out in Excel everything to that particular piece of equipment. So you have time series data, and then it says comments from the last 6 months. You take that file, paste it straight into GPT-4o, costs you $20 a month. And you could say, describe, the kinds of issues that are happening in this machine, in this process of the last 6 months, generate a table describing the frequency, impact, and it'll spit out a table. So like for those who are thinking about, how can I use this right now? You probably have a database with text-based data that describes what's happening at a machine. You can put it into ChatGPT and it'll spit out a table with this. Similarly, if you have data on your CRM that describes quality issues described by your customers, you can paste in hundreds of pages of data from your CRM into $20 a month GPT-4 and get it to describe, and
Martin,
data. Yeah.
Martin, let me interrupt you, because if I had one of those things where I could beep you out, I would have bleeped you out 4 times. I want to remind everybody that Mesa does not endorse any specific technology.
Okay, the generative AI in general. So whichever one you happen to be
there
a
are
fan
many
of.
applications that can be used to
Absolutely.
provide that functionality. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Maybe if I may comment, the one thing that we need to keep in mind when we start working with Gen AI on the shop floor is that most of the data that you work with is sensitive manufacturing data. A lot of the time containing intellectual property of the company itself. So you will not want to use a public Gen AI type of solution, as you mentioned.
Right.
So one of your first steps that you need to make when you implement your AI solution on the shop floor is to ensure that you have a secure environment. And then you can start building from there. Usually, for example, what we've done is to start on a small scale with simple use cases and build from that outwards. But the essence is that you need to be sure that whatever your data sources are secure to your company, because in manufacturing or on the shop floor, that's where your IP lies.
Yep. Fully agree. Yep. Yeah. Mike, did you want to chime in on that?
No, I think that's this idea. I think one of the things that Yapi brings a great point up about how important it is to protect your intellectual data. In fact, one of the things that it sounds kind of crazy, it's a side point here, but it's important for any manufacturer perhaps to have a policy around Gen AI to make sure that their employees understand what they can and can't use publicly. So just a side point.
Yep.
What's interesting is that the advancement of these models, it's not going to be long before organizations are going to be able to run their own models completely isolated from the outside world. The level of capability of these systems and the fact that most manufacturers can benefit from, technology that was good 6 months ago. Right now, that is plenty, and the fact that these systems are getting more and more lightweight. I think that like making sure that proprietary information, not only your documents, but also your interactions, like the conversations that you have on the shop floor with your teams, if you're using that to feed your own models, that is your IP. That is what makes your organization special. So making sure that is done in a safe way is important. And I would say that as technology is advancing, I could see us being even more able to cordon things off, so you're not having to leverage external systems.
Yep.
Martin brings a great point up. For a lot of companies, you certainly have your technology, but it's your people that's actually in some ways your secret sauce. And their knowledge, their process, especially if they've been around for a while. And so protecting that's really important. Sometimes we overlook the people too much when we think about the technology, but the people is a really important part of this, and it's really, like you alluded to, it's our intellectual property.
Yeah, and bringing the people knowledge together with the process knowledge, right?
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, so unless there's any other thoughts there, let's move on to another topic. I guess I'm going to stick with you, Mike, since you were just commenting there. Can you talk a little bit about how you see generative AI being used effectively in training situations?
Yeah. So, and unfortunately, I don't have a great example, but I'll share an aspiration, and maybe there's somebody on the call that's done this, but I think it's not very far away. We have this concern, or we had this concern about, we'll call it the brain drain, where our more experienced workforce retires and doesn't leave their knowledge with our younger workforce. And in the past, we used to sit down and try to write all this down. Well, that never worked. I can think about my 35 years at Michelin, and I can tell you that I think I went through 3 or 4 different projects on knowledge sharing. None of them ever stuck because we had this heavy documentation with it. But imagine a future where, our more experienced operators and workers have the ability to tell their stories as they're working and capture that knowledge as we're going, and that becomes then the knowledge base from which we use then and put next to a new person so that the amount of time a new person requires someone sitting by them to do their work is much less. And they have this AI assistant, if you will, who is available now to them to help them when they get into a situation that's perhaps unique. And so I think it's where we can combine the generative thing where we've talked earlier about it's enhanced, our common problem solving is enhanced, and our common standards are enhanced by the experience of our more experienced folks. And now that's available to our new workforce to help them learn their job and gain quickly the knowledge that our more experienced folks have, and unfortunately in the past just took out the door with them as they left and retired.
I think one of the things that we need to do for our workforce is people need to learn how to be taught by generative AI. I think it's intuitive to some. I can think of an example where I was installing a dishwasher. I didn't know how to install a dishwasher, so I got it to, use direct, concise language, going through all the steps. When I saw something that didn't make sense, I took a photo and pasted that photo. So I'm accustomed to having generative AI as my assistant to help me learn whatever I happen to need to learn. But that skill set of using generative AI to learn is not necessarily intuitive. And I think that's something that we need to teach our teams. And just imagine, for example, the first one would be you have a training manual and you get 10 new hires walking through this training manual through a chat interface. So if you have a closed system and you're able to see those interactions, the next time you go through it, you could write a prompt that says, based on the training that just happened, compare and contrast the approaches that different students took in these 10 sessions. And you'll see that some of them struggled and some of them improved. The next time you run that training, you could put a prompt in to say, please adapt your approach based on the experiences of these 10 students. So this is the idea where, as people begin to interact with it, the actual interactions themselves, let's just say you've just onboarded 10 assemblers and they're walking through a questionnaire to make sure that they understand the policies of your plant. The content of those chat interactions can actually be used to train future interactions so that that's even better. And really, that's kind of the ultimate goal with this, is to not only fix a problem once, but to be constantly making the experience better and better and better.
Yeah, go ahead, Mike.
If I could just piggyback on that, Martin, I think at the top of the hour, Chris, you mentioned that being World Autism Awareness Day.
Yeah.
And let's take that even further, where this becomes customized, customized to the individual who maybe have a neurological disorder. And now they've got, Gen AI is talking to them the way they want to be talked to, the way they're comfortable being worked, having somebody support them. That's huge. It opens the door to folks, the personal productivity of folks with those with autism and other neurological disorders to being much more productive, because they know they have a if you will, a colleague or an AI assistant that's completely generated around their needs. I think it's pretty strong.
Yeah, that's a good point. Would any other panelists like to comment on that topic? I was just going to bring that up, so thanks for doing that, Mike.
I think and it's only getting stronger. So like for a while it's been text based, and now we're able to create images with text. So if somebody happens to be better at learning, on the shop floor, if you're training somebody, you can train in their language. You can now create visuals, compelling visuals, if that happens to be, video, audio, pretty much it can adapt. And I could imagine as we progress is that, the way that you learn best could almost get modeled, and you could have, what is the formula for teaching Chris anything, right? So Chris, you have your little config file that describes how you like to learn. And then if you have to learn something, everything is tailored to the particular way that you learn best.
I have it right over here.
Your config file? Is it on a 5 1/4?
Yeah, right. It's on a Post-it note, right? No, I get you. That's excellent commentary. I guess before we move on, Yapi, did you want to add to that topic at all? And then I'll bring up a different one. No, everything's covered. You're happy with everything that everybody said? Okay. Great. Well, thanks for that. I guess I'll kind of close that out by saying, there's a big difference between to the points that were made before, a big difference between reading a training manual and, being directed, versus, this kind of AI sort of Gen AI interface that we're talking about that can be more interactive and adaptive to your needs.
Well, then experiencing it now, not just reading it.
Yep. Good point. Good point. Yep. Okay, so we have a little bit of time left. So one of the things that I'd like to do is bring up a slightly different topic. We've been talking mostly about how to provide individuals, workers with the appropriate information that they need in order to do their job, and to train those individuals in advance of having to do their job. Can we talk a little bit about how Gen AI can be used to look at actual operational data, and look at, for example, historical data from the process, um, event data from the process, records that were potentially stored in MES systems, that sort of thing. And I don't have any specific target for this, but I think I'm just going to go randomly to you, Yapi, if you don't mind. Do you have any experience that you can share with the group about this?
Can't really think of anything right now. Maybe
No?
maybe give one of the other guys the opportunity to answer, and I can think
Okay,
about
sorry. I
something.
told you I was going to do it randomly. How about you, Mike?
Why don't you rephrase the question, Chris, a little bit?
Okay, so we've been talking about using textual data and using that to inform people. What about using, I'll just say, numerical data or historical data about the process, event data, that sort of thing. And if nobody else can comment, I don't know,
Well,
Martin, if you
yeah,
can.
Yeah.
Go
I
ahead.
was going to say, my first reaction, that sounds a lot like just where we were before Gen AI to a great extent, to be honest with you. We've been doing that for a while with predictive maintenance and predictive quality, right? And machine learning. So, I think the question is when the real lever with Gen AI is much more of this textual information that isn't available as it was in the past. I know that's my first reaction to your question, Chris.
Well, what I was getting at is, for example, once you identify that there's a problem with a piece of equipment, might it be nice to offer up a question to a Gen AI tool about that equipment and say, can you tell me about past failures on that equipment?
Yeah,
Go ahead,
I
Martin.
went like, yeah, no, I think like, so in some ways, because of our lack of access to textual data, we've trained ourselves to look at numbers and try to figure out what's going on based on the numbers. So like I like the 5 why framework, I think like can apply here. So let's say that the numbers can like why was this machine down? Why did this person not show up today? Why are we late on delivery? The first level of why is probably answered with a number. But numbers aren't a compelling way to communicate what to do next.
Mhm.
And the challenge is we likely right now on the data side, there's likely there's a tremendous amount of rich data there that is just not delivered to us in a way that actually makes us take action. So one of the most valuable ways that generative AI can take this is actually add context. And the way people typically do this now is they take this graph that says like you're late on delivery, you've been late for 3 months, it's getting worse, right? And then they spend time putting it into a presentation and adding a bunch of stuff so you can actually read it and interpret it. So if I were to think about what generative AI can do right now, we don't need it to dig into the data and interpret that. We already have that insight. We're late on delivery, things are getting worse. Why? The answer is in all that context that adds the second why, the third why, the fourth why, that's in the text and that's in that presentation. So right now, for example, you can use generative AI to grab data from here, charts and graphs and numbers, text from here, and on the like in seconds put together a 10-page document that describes, what is our current situation with delivery, how can we move forward, and then you take this document, and then rather than waiting a week to get it to your team, you can send it in minutes, and now you've chopped off a week, and now you can spend more time solving problems rather than waiting to create that document. So this is it. So I would say like the actual number crunching itself, our numbers for the most part, like many organizations have amazing numbers. They just aren't able to deliver it to people in an effective way to trigger timely actions.
Yeah. And in a lot of cases, what we were talking about before, if we remember when we started off the conversation talking about detection using indicators and then ultimately doing root cause analysis and then action. It's really at the early stage is you're using the numbers to do that detection. Maybe the beginning part of the root cause analysis, and then you're right, a human has to kind of come in and do the problem solving, and ultimately take action.
Just reduce that time and then make them pick the right problem at the right time. So they're still going to do that problem solving because people are amazing at that, but it's shorten the timeline and get them there sooner. Great.
That's great. I would like to move on very quickly here to a bit of Q&A. So we have about 15 minutes left, just under. Prior to doing that, Mike, Yape, anything to add to the previous comments? Or
I would like to comment on the points that Mike and Martin mentioned, but also the topic in general. When you look at operational data and using this in a Gen AI environment or in an AI environment, what is critical is that you need to be sure that your data is clean and reliable. If you do not have that confidence, then whatever answers your AI is going to give you is at risk, right? I think everyone would know that. But then looking at what you mentioned, Chris, with respect to the suggestions, the historical information about when a certain condition exists, what do I need to do? Then it depends how well you kept log of those incidents in the past, and now also how your Gen AI tool have access to this data source that you have. I think that is critical. And looking at it from a practical point of view, and what normally happens on the shop floor is that people do not keep good record of the actions that they take to fix problems. They fix it, maybe a lot of times by coincidence, but then they don't document it. And if you don't have those actions or solutions documented, you're going to have trouble using AI to help you solve your problem. So those are things that you need to keep in mind before you start thinking about implementing AI, is probably get the basics right, and then you can consider implementing Gen AI.
Jeppy, what's exciting is that many manufacturers collect data and they don't use it. And I think what's interesting here is that even if you have a monstrous amount of data, you can actually go back and it's likely that you'd be able to uncover insights in your performance, even if you brought in an AI tool now. You, like many organizations, just because it's the right thing to do, you've been documenting it, but you haven't used that document at all. So I think that it's interesting how quickly manufacturers can see value from this, because many of them have okay documentation, and actually like with generative AI, it doesn't need to be perfect, but we want something to be there. It just cannot be blank.
Yeah, and it's amazing how much data we do collect and we don't even realize it.
Don't use. Yep. All right, well, listen, everybody, to that end, we've only got just over 10 minutes left. Let's get a couple of questions in here, and I'm going to draw upon the panelists to help answer these questions. So try to be brief with your answers, given that I want to cover as much as we can. The first one I'm going to ask comes from someone who is an anonymous attendee, and that is that there's a challenge to convince operators to accept the triggers, to trust those triggers, and any recommendations that might come forward from GenAI to execute or solve the problem. Any guidance on how that's been successfully done or could be successfully done?
Maybe I'll jump in. I think that's a classic change management conversation, right? So, it's ensuring that you can't, the first time you ask folks to do something like that, can't be the first time you've talked about it. So, think through this as a change management with any project you're going to have and think about how you're going to sustain it. Typically, there should be some dissatisfaction on the shop floor for something that would motivate them to use it, some vision about how it's going to help them, and then it's got to be easy to use. I think those three things together are necessary to actually overcome that resistance to change and help someone move forward and trust it.
Yep.
Maybe just quick. I don't trust it, GenAI to make. I don't trust it. I trust it to make me go faster, but I don't trust it to make decisions on my behalf. And basically, people need to figure out how to use this tool to enable them to apply their judgment to more things, but not as a replacement for judgment. And there's a difference there because that last 5% which makes the difference between you doing a good thing or a bad thing, I trust that in the hands of people more than generative AI, but you're able to go faster with it. So I think the mistrust is warranted, and it needs to be framed as something where we're not looking to replace their judgment. We're looking to enable them to apply their judgment more effectively.
Very, very good point, Martin. I've seen that in many different types of applications, process control, weapon systems, all kinds of things like that. I completely agree. So this is a question that Pedro, I hope I pronounce your name correctly, Pedro. It's Pedro Guerrero. I believe I pronounced that right. He had asked, in manufacturing, we have plenty of structured data. GenAI also needs a lot of unstructured data, which is a lot of what we've been talking about, right? To text. So how do you organize and build this knowledge to train our model? It's kind of a wide open question. So I'll leave it up to any of our panelists to jump in on that.
Maybe I can comment.
Oh.
Using an example that we followed is that when you start to implement GenAI, you explore new use cases. And we, for example, usually started small, looked at the results and improved on a continuous basis on what we wanted to implement. So going with a big bang, yes, for sure, you are going to have problems training your model. And also at the end of the day, it matters how much money you are prepared to throw at teaching the models, right? But if you start small and you build from there outwards, I think you have a good chance of effectively training your models and getting it to do what you expect to get out of it.
I think this lazy application of AI is dangerous, and in some ways, if you need to approach it in a structured way. So you want to minimize how much lifting it needs to do. So narrow down the questions to something very specific, and you can likely devise systems that are quite structured, where you're not throwing your entire folder of all your manufacturing data into one thing and say, hey, tell me what's going on. That's going to fail. So you basically need to break it down so you're using generative AI's abilities in a small structured way. And I think that's what Yappy mentioned. You need to start small and then build up, but there needs to be an architecture. If you don't have an architecture, you apply lazy AI, you're gonna make a mess, and the mess is gonna make people distrust it, which is gonna go to Mike's point earlier, which is change management. So really the structured approach is critical.
Yeah, I'm just going to add one other comment too. What the operator calls it versus the team lead versus the supervisor and then the manager, oftentimes they call the same thing 4 different words. And so understanding those differences and working on a common language, if you're going to use contextual feedback that way, you got to understand that and create a glossary, or else get it right, because it can be confusing and you'll get chaos if you're not careful.
Yeah, all good points. So another question, I think I'm going to try to interpret this question from Gustavo Lima, which his question, I think, was asking, which cases are happening with the most perceived impact in various industries, in actual projects. Gustavo, hopefully I captured that question appropriately. I've had some experience applying these tools, but I'm sure others on the call have. Who would like to jump in on this one?
What's the question? Which applications have had the most impact, kind of broadly?
Oh, which applications are happening,
Well,
and and what is the impact with the most perceived impact? Yeah.
I mean, historically, it's not GenAI, but AI. It's predictive maintenance, predictive quality is there's an awful lot of use cases where those have been quite successful and driven significant improvement for a lot of companies. So,
That
if you haven't gone down that road, maybe you're not ready to do the other. I don't know.
Well, that's a very good
I don't
point.
know.
I'd love for somebody,
I don't know.
whether it's yourself, Mike, or somebody on the panel here, to comment on going from, that sort of tool where you're doing predictive analytics and you're not really interacting with a person there as in a textual way, to Gen AI. It's
Yeah.
they should both be used, right? And I don't know that.
Maybe, but not everybody needs the like AI vision systems. There's lots of manufacturers that have no AI, and that's perfectly fine. It just depends on the application. I think like the most simple. I'd be curious to see for manufacturers that have taught their teams how to use AI to measure how many seconds their team members are spending sitting down at their desk. And like I would say that the most significant change is that they have a lot more time to be on the shop floor because they're not burning 45 minutes crafting an
Yeah.
email to their team. And I would say like that the most obvious thing is like, and there's a reason why top manufacturers put their folks on the shop floor with a crappy chair and are focusing like that's the model here. How can we get people away from doing the non-value adding activity at their desk, writing email, digging through documents? So that would be the key measure. Less time sitting down on a chair, more time on the shop floor, walking around, solving problems, talking to your teams.
Yeah, classic lean application, eliminating waste.
But that's the most obvious application right now that everybody can do with, for $20 a month with who knows which vendor, Chris. But like that's something that people can do today. You can, if your teams get trained on how to use these tools, you can reduce the amount of time sitting at your desk by 2x, 3x, and that has a massive impact on performance.
As I listen to these comments, I kind of think about the application of Gen AI in other areas, in generally, just in just in commercial situations, non-industrial situations. And it's the same sort of thing, even going back to what you were saying before, Martin. I think there's a few things that have rung true in here. It's you got to know how to prompt a Gen AI system to give you the results that are going to be meaningful to you. Two, you got to be able to trust them to the extent that you need to still put in your own decision-making process to know how to take action, going back to our original comments. And ultimately, this is something that is an enabler for a lot of people. It's just we're at the beginning of exploring it. So we've got 1 minute left. We have a ton of other questions that have been asked, and we won't be able to answer them on this call. I'm going to ask everybody on the panel here to give me a 20-second parting comment, and we'll go from there.
I'll start really quick. Yeah, I'll start really quick. Just explore. Don't, if you're on the sideline, you're not going to learn. Get in there and explore. You've heard lots of things and possibilities today. But start yourself personally and see what it can do for you, and then you'll begin to know where it can go further for you in your business.
Good comment. Explore. Yapi, you're next.
Yeah, so definitely don't be afraid to jump in and start using this technology. And go and find use cases for this, for using Gen AI. If you go and sit down with your teams or your company, you can explore numerous opportunities to apply this new technology, especially on the shop floor. And just go and jump in and start doing it.
Cool. Good comment. Martin, give me 20 seconds and I'll close up.
Yeah, I would say that, you know, people need to use it to do something practical, and I would say it's probably most comfortable for people to do things outside of the work environment to get a feel for what it can do, and whether or not that's writing, writing an email or creating a new image. In some ways, if you can find ways to get to installing a dishwasher. So like if you can find ways to get it to do practical things for you in an environment where you're not, it's not a work environment, I think that's the perfect place for you to wrap your head around what it is and what it isn't. And I think that's been like, at least for my personal growth using that tool, it's those strange applications off the side that inform what we do at work, because that helps you, that enables you to explore, and it's unbounded. But the key thing is start to figure out how to use it to do things. And there's often things that you could do at home just as easily as you could do at the office.
Yep. Yeah, that's great. That's a great comment. And we've noticed that a lot with the adoption of, things like cell phones and tablets and, things that were traditionally used in commercial environments, and now they're being used in industrial environments. So, yeah, great comment. Listen, this panel, I really have to say, has a tremendous wealth of knowledge and experience, and thank you very much for your comments. As I said, we have a number of additional questions which we've not been able to answer. We will try to get back to them offline. Apart from that, this recording will be available in the Mesa Resource Library in about a week or so. Thank you, panelists. Very much appreciate it. I hope everyone enjoys the rest of their day, and come back again soon.
Thank you very much.
Take care, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.